as opposed to uniting. It's always a push to separate. And what the separation comes on the basis of greed. We want it all. And then when we get it all from those who don't look like them, then they start taking it from those who do look like them. But when you start looking at the cohesiveness in family structure and people of color, it's totally different. It's totally different. People of color will sacrifice their last dime to help take care of their family. And when I say family, I'm talking about be it a grandchild, a child, etc. They would do that. Now, what happened? Why are there those of us who won't do that? It's because we bought into what we call the American dream, which is a Caucasian idea of separation. We want what they got. We want what we want. We've been convinced that that's the best lifestyle to have. So now we have become selfish and greedy also. And the more we move away from the roots that our foreparents instilled in us, the more we get to a place of a desire to separate. And that desire is manifested in us moving away from each other, who we think is not on a socioeconomic level that we're on. And the walls that we build between family members and former friends who don't have what we have in terms of material stuff. Does that make sense?
So,
what is happening?
so the person, so those who believe more in materialistic things are further away.
Yes.
Are more deeply bound to separation than those who don't.
Yes. There's a density that exists there that's different from those who don't. Example, when you look at people of color primarily, people of color are usually in search of something spiritual. And is always diminished. The search is always diminished by those who are standard set, those who set the standards for spirituality. And those who set the standard for spirituality are those with the guns. The colonizers are the ones who set the standard for spirituality. If you don't believe that Easter is what they say Easter is, then you're heathens. It doesn't matter what the Bible says. It's what they say, the colonizers, the imperialists say. And again, it has nothing to do with race. And what the part that race plays is to make us afraid to speak the truth. Because when you begin to speak the truth, the first thing they say is you're playing the race card. That's designed to shut you up. That's designed to perpetuate separateness. Now, what I'm saying is that when we began to thaw this frozen attitude about interdependency, when we begin to do that, that's when we are called heathens, pagans, racists, atheists, whatever. Anything it takes to stop you from thinking openly and stop you from dealing with what truth is, that's what you're labeled as. And because of our desire to fit in, even though we'll never fit in, because of our desire to do it, we recoil from saying the things that we know needs to be said. Now, and I was, even when Sheldon first set up his broadcasting, my first question was, are you broadcasting? Because I was hesitant about dealing with it because of the nature of what I'm talking about. And I believe in the hesitancy comes from the conditioning that I have had over the years. Because everything we talk about in relationship to black and white is always termed racist.
And my question was designed not only to hear what you said, but hear what the solution is to get beyond.
Right, and
beyond me, a Caucasian, hearing you say that.
And I want you to help me find that solution so we can get beyond that. And the reason I say that, because I think it's essential that we get beyond that, because, and I don't know what, let me get this in. and I don't know whether this is recorded or not, but the conversation began with me saying that I believe that our Caucasians represent the depth of the perpetuation of the desire to be separate. And we as a people, Africans represent the desire to reunite with the Creator. Because of the spirituality that we've grown up with, that we see about us as a culture. And it has nothing to do with race at all, but it has everything to do with the reality of thought, the reality of what is. And the reason I see it that way is because the Caucasians are the ones who set the standard for separation. And the standard for separation is that you separate on the basis of color, and then after you get separated on the basis of color, you begin to separate then on the basis of economics. Then you separate on the basis of education. You see what I'm talking about? Look at what happened with us after...
For security purposes, this call has been terminated.
Look at what happened to us after slavery. Do it again in about 20 minutes. Look at what happened to us after slavery. After slavery, we separated on the basis of color, brown bag society. You know, in order to be assimilated, we used a hot straightening comb in our heads in order to feel like we could, you know, we were a part of, as opposed to embracing who we really are. We told our children, you know, get a good job and move up in society, and you will be accepted. That's what, you know. All those things were honorable things, but at the same time, they were avenues of separation. Because now what happens? First you move into the suburbs because you're separating from those who have less than you. Then once you get into the suburbs and you begin to see others are able to move into the suburbs too, now you move into a gated community in the suburbs. You see? Which is further separation. Now that others have got gated communities in the suburbs, you come back into the city and began to live in gated communities within the city. You see what I'm talking about? Again, separation. So now you begin to see that regardless of race, people are beginning to move forward economically, socially, and educationally, right? So what happens now? You begin to take everything from even the people who look like you. That's why you got Occupy whatever. If it were just the people of color, you wouldn't have Occupy nothing other than the bottom rung of the ladder. But because of what's happening, now you got all these Occupy things set up. And again, it is a cry for unification. And the cry for unification is not coming from us as a people in terms of African Americans. The cry for unification at this juncture is coming from Caucasians, young Caucasians, who see what separation is doing. It's destructive. It diminishes mankind. It diminishes us. And even in using this, I don't even like to use the term human anymore. And the reason I don't is because I would rather use the term when we operate in the illusion of, rather than saying we are operating as humans. You see, because all of it is illusionary. Yes. And the more we begin to see the truth of the separation and how it operates, how it manifests itself, the more we are able to bring about the exit, the reverse exit through the fourth letter of the door, back into the place where we're supposed to be, which is the womb of beginning. Am I making sense?
Yes. I mean, I can see.
Yeah. Come on, ask some more questions then. Press the olive. Crush the grapes. Make some wine.
Was an opportunity missed in the 60s, or was that just, it wasn't time? Or was it, I mean, because I feel like there's a connection.
I think the 60s was not a missed opportunity, but I think it was a foundational opportunity. Okay. It laid the foundation for what's happening now. Yeah. See, I believe that not just me, but people like me, with the tremendous amount of exposure that I had in the 60s in terms of the racism, the politics of it all, and how I felt at that time was necessary in order to be able to evolve into something more positive. And the evolution of something more positive comes as a result of being able to rightly analyze what was transpiring at that period of time and do it from a basis of a positive attitude as opposed to something negative. And what I mean by something negative is by everything that makes me feel like or appear to be superior to some other people is a negative. That's what I mean by that. So I'm not doing it from the basis of the African superiority at all, but I am doing it for a basis of a need for or necessity for us as people, not a people in terms of individual races, but as people, period, to move to a place where we understand that it is the desire for materialism that separates us. And the whole concept of greed is about acquiring material things. That's the whole concept of greed. The greed is not about me wanting all the love or to give you all. That's not greed. Greed is about the acquisition of material things. And the basis for it all comes from a superiority complex. And you know how we talk about the Napoleon complex when people are short. You know, we talk about the Napoleon complex. When people feel like they are the smallest amount on the earth, there's a complex. You see, we have to defend ourselves. Yeah. Now, I believe that between Caucasians and Africans and all the races in between these two, there is a gradation of attitude towards separation and unification. I believe that. And what helped me to see this or begin looking at it in the way that I'm speaking of it is that I was riding and I thought about something. Nobody on earth like us.
You're right. We don't like us.
I'm serious. Well, I agree. Nobody on earth like us, not even us. But we've been taught not to like us. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So my question is, okay, why is it no one likes us? Where did all this come from? It came from the desire for separation. And we used to love ourselves. We stopped liking ourselves when we began to what we call progress. The violent nature of the community began to develop when we began to progress and elevate ourselves above those who we grew up with. And another thing that helped me to see it, start thinking in this direction, and it's going to seem totally disconnected, but it really isn't, is when I began to see that around the earth there was a matrix of points of energy, and if you draw the lines to the matrix of the points of energy, it forms a pentagon. And it dawned on me, okay, the place. Why did they choose the place that they chose to build the Pentagon? That was not done arbitrarily. The place where the Pentagon sits today used to be called Black Bottom. There was nobody there but black folk, and it was one of the least desired pieces of property in the area until they decided to build the Pentagon. And it wasn't a thing where they said, okay, we go build a Pentagon, we go buy this property. No. They did a Rosewood type thing. They drove the people out of that area either by death or however it took, they put them out and put the Pentagon there. So all these things are coming into play, you know, in my mind. And I'm beginning to see that in order for us to get to the place where we think in terms of the spiritual on a continuous basis so that we can begin acting spiritually on a continuous basis because that's who we are. So if you acting spiritual, you're acting like who you are. And in order for us to do that, we have to get beyond these physical things that we have created. That we have congealed. And the physical things that we have congealed or minerals. It's something. The materials like the chemicals on the periodic chart, and the minerals in the earth. These kinds of things we have brought into play, and these are the things that are used to separate us. I mean, think about it this way. There are just as many diamonds on the face of the earth as it is coal. So what makes diamonds so expensive? De Beers. De Beers. De Beers make diamonds expensive. Again, so what does a diamond do? If you got a big old diamond ring and you don't have one, you got a little diamond chip. You see? Or you got some quartz. You see what I'm talking about? So who set the standard for that? It wasn't us. You see what I'm talking about? It's the attitude. So Caucasian does not represent a race as much as it represents an attitude. African doesn't represent a race as much as it represents an attitude. So what happened, in order for the attitude to be changed, there had to be a dilution of that attitude. It had to be merged. It had to be able, the attitude to move towards a realization of unification with Creator, and the attitude towards moving away from unification with the Creator, the attitude of separation had to come together. And the reason it had to come together is so that attitude that desires Creator can understand the attitude that desires separation, so that the attitude that desires Creator can help the attitude that desires separation see that there is strength in knowing who you are. And the attitude that desires separation can see the error of its ways. So bringing that together, it was brought together in a violent way. And it had to be brought together in a violent way because it could not be done voluntarily. Why? Because opposing forces, energies that repel each other, when they are brought together, they have to be forced together. And the violent forcefulness to bring it together, we call it slavery. And until we get beyond the concept of slavery and begin to see that there is a beginning before slavery, we will not be able to appreciate who we are. You see where I'm coming from?
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And when we begin to appreciate who we are, we look beyond the race. We look beyond the attitude. We look beyond all the negative stuff, all this stuff that does not matter. We look beyond all of that. Does that make sense?
It does.
So how do we get beyond that? By again dealing with what really does exist and the way things really are. And when you begin to deal with what really exists and the way things really are, that's what gets you back to the womb of beginning. Because when you get to the womb of beginning, you see that there was not a man created. It does not say man. It said Adam. And Adam is not man. It was just translated as man by the perpetuators of separation. Adam is El Dama. El is God, and Dama is sap or juice or that which flows. You see what I'm talking about? So what was created was a God with divinity flowing through it. Can you see that?
Yeah.
When you talk about Adam, you see that's what was done, and when that desire to leave father mother came about, it was as a result of the entity separating the feminine energy and feeling itself superior to that energy. That's where it began. And as a result of that, the further we got away from the belief that we are one with the Creator, the more dense it became. And the more dense it became, the more we began to form these bodies and these planets and this earth and these things around. That's what was formed. And the more the desire of separation increased, the more we began to get these gradations of race. of what we call race, which represent attitudes. And that's my, what, supposition? No.
And the question,
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Come on. Somebody.
Well, I'm thinking you're right about the attitude because I see a lot of Caucasians. They so free. You hear when I watch TV, I hear the young Caucasians saying, white people saying, "I'm young, 21, white, and free," or something like that.
Well, let me give you an example.
Yeah, free white and 21.
Kathy had a kid, and she was talking to this young lady, and she was telling her she needed to improve her attitude and her grades. And she said, "For what? I'm blue-eyed and blonde and female. I'm gonna make it."
Yeah, that attitude.
She's 13. Come on.
Yeah,
You see what I'm talking about?
that's attitude. Yeah.
But that's, so where did that come from? It come from we control everything.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. Think about it this way. I can go into the inner city and I can see a Caucasian walking through the roughest neighborhood and they're just as comfortable doing it.
Mm-hmm.
But when you do it,
Yeah.
why? If you mess with me, ain't much gonna happen. You mess with that Caucasian,
Mm-hmm.
you got the police department, the National Guard, the Army, the Navy, you got Interpol,
Yes.
you got everything.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And again, I must reiterate, it's not about racism, it's about reality. That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
And we have to face the reality of it. And when we face the reality of it and get comfortable with facing it, and again, we are going to be called racist, we're going to be called all these other names, but we cannot allow these names to in any way inhibit what we say. But as the opposite, we must allow those names to enhance the necessity of our saying it. Move over a little bit so she can stretch her legs out.
Well,
You good? Okay. Okay.
no, I want to say something else. When I say, I'm just mad
Okay.
at some of them because.
Now,
Let me finish though.
I don't want you to be mad.
I know you don't, and I know it's not going to accomplish anything. But from what I'm experiencing, I know it's necessary, but it makes me angry. Well, not angry, but kind of like.
Yeah, it does.
No, I'm not angry about it. It just, I'm mad.
Well, yeah, what's the difference? What's the difference? Now, let me show you something. Let me show you something, okay?
Okay.
To be angry about something of that nature, the next step, what you're really saying, you're racist.
Me?
Yes.
Okay.
That's what you're really saying. Let me finish it, okay? Because there's a very thin line between being angry with some white people for what they do to you, when black people do the same thing, or worse, and you ain't angry with them.
Yes,
There's a very, you see what I'm talking about?
Pastor.
There's a very thin line. This is what I'm saying to you. And the reason I don't want to give life to it by putting it out there is because we have to mature beyond that. As long as you stay angry with something, it controls you. It controls you. And the moment you get beyond the anger, you begin to control it. I want to get Barbara's question first, okay? I really want to get this question
I don't
first.
know if it'll get Ellen off track.
Okay. Go ahead, Evelyn.
No, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Well, I'm hurt.
That's
Because
a better word.
Yeah, I'm hurt because if I'd have been angry when I talked to you yesterday, you'd have known it.
Yeah.
Okay? So I'm more hurt than anything.
Okay, now, the hurt that you experience is necessary so that you can be healed from it, so others can be healed from the hurt. See, this is the reason you're hurt. You're hurt because you were denied a material thing. you ain't hurt because you don't know nothing spiritual. And I don't mean you ever. I'm talking about, you know, we ain't hurt because we've been deprived of knowing the truth of the scriptures. We are hurt because we didn't get a job. We are hurt because we weren't able to afford. It ain't the job, it's the money that come with it. It's the benefits. Isn't it? Come on, y'all. Talk to me. The reality of it is, let me put this out here right now. I will shut it down if you get to a discussion of race. Because I'm not going to do that. That's not what I'm talking about here. Okay? I will shut it down if you get to a discussion of race. Because this is not, the hurt, the anger is understood. But there's no difference about being hurt because a man hurt a woman or race hurting the people. Hurt is hurt. It just comes from different sources. Now, how do you handle that? Go ahead.
I'm experiencing something similar, but I don't agree that, well, at least in my situation, that it has anything to do with being hurt because of something material. And I mean, I've experienced a pattern of behavior from white males that have power on the job or whatever. And I am consistently discounted or ignored. My opinion isn't valued. It doesn't really matter how much experience I have. I might even bring some facts, but those facts will be ignored because I brought them. And that's hurtful.
You know why?
You know, I get full up. I'm like, I just don't want to deal with that attitude.
That's more female than anything. It's not because you're black. White males don't respect femininity, especially when they're in a position of authority. That's about that more than anything else. So we go back to the woman thing again. This guy was telling me the other day. He said, my mama called my daddy. And my mama says, he called him at work. He said, what are you doing? He says to her, I'm getting ready to eat. And she says, I just called to see, you know, what you're doing. You don't want to talk to me? I'm getting ready to eat. Click. And I said, well, if I had called, there would have been a conversation. And he says, you know, that's because the men in my family don't respect females, don't think they have anything worthy of saying. These are black folks. You see what I'm talking about? So it is, whether it be in a corporate setting or in a household, it's the same principle when it comes to discounting whether or not a woman has anything of value to add to the conversation. You see? So that's more of that than anything else. And that is something that's an addendum to what I'm discussing.
That's part of the separation thing you're talking
right.
about, into gender and the power associated with the masculine energy from the illusion of the masculine energy in this reality. And it's a lack of knowledge that both complement and have value.
Let me go. It was you or Diane. I don't know which one you want. Her or him. Okay.
The question regarding the 13-year-old that you talked about earlier, my question is that coming to an end, given the fact that Barack is now president and certain things are changing? And the reason why I ask that because I have a friend who's African American. She's in another country with other military women, and she makes less than the Caucasian women, but they're always jealous of her and her husband relationship. So my question is, can you they can have it all but still be desiring what somebody?
See, that's where greed comes from. Greed is a desire to fill an emptiness, and and the emptiness that desire to be filled is that knowledge of who you are, the relationship, the understanding that you're one with the Creator, the God image that you were created in. That's what greed is. That's why there's never enough when you're greedy. The hole just gets bigger that you're trying to fill.
Oh, I was just gonna say when she was bringing up the issue with the racism and not being listened to, and just coming from an environment where I work with 7 white males and nobody else, I agree. That the attitude, like you're saying, has to come from males disrespecting females. Even before there was a black and white violent mixture to slavery, that comes from way back, even just in their little circle. And I can even hear it from them. It's not so much an issue of race as it is sexism.
And that's again, I thought you didn't. I'm thinking about the other thing I wrote. One of the things that I expounded, attempted to, was the different ways that separation is manifested. Racism, sexism, economics, education, all of these things perpetuate separation. My career perpetuates separation. Because my career, in relationship to whatever you do, you see, my education, my children, my family, my, is all about me and mine as opposed to us. The idea of community. You remember the firestorm that rose when Hillary Clinton said it takes a village to raise a child? Yeah. You remember that firestorm? Why? Because that concept of a village raising a child is foreign to everyone except us. Now, the generations after us is foreign, because you don't touch my child, you don't say anything to my child. But when we grew up, it was a village rearing us. And it did not have to be your blood relative to chastise you either. It could be any adult. You see where I'm coming from? So that's, I guess what I'm trying to get us to see is that cultural cohesiveness is a manifestation of the desire to get to the place, for lack of a better term, to be united with where we came from, beginning. To realize the oneness that we truly are. That's all I'm saying. And again, I don't want any of us to get bogged down in the race issue, because that's not real. That in itself is an illusion. And it's a self-perpetuating illusion designed to keep us separated from each other, so that we will not recognize that we are one mind and that we are one people.
Well, I recognize it's happening for me to do something about it.
Right.
And I've successfully handled one of them. Like, I can have a conversation with him and feel connected and not want to hurt him. But the other two, I'm really struggling. Like, it was at the point where I didn't even want to park next to him if I saw his car in the parking lot. You know, and I didn't want to hurt him or anything, but I just
didn't. Did you hate him?
I thought about that. I did, because I was like, it must be serious if you don't want to park next to him. But it's really more of an issue of, I just don't want anything. I want you as far away from me as possible. I don't want to experience any more hurt. Like, I just want to be separated from you.
Okay, see that? You hear that?
Yeah, that's what.
You have to help me, Jesus.
So I've been forcing myself, you know, not to park far away from his car, and you know, if we come into work at the same time, I'll walk with him, I'll talk with him, and it's getting better, but it's not all the way there yet. Like, I don't feel connected like I do with the other guy.
You did the right thing. Why? Because the one who you feel like you need to distance yourself from is the one you need to be the closest to, because they need something from you. They need something from you. Now, you talked about the males, you know, this is a thing that's from way back when, right? And we talked about the sexism thing. The reason that males are like that about females is because they need something from them. It's called balance. They need that balance. And if a female keep staying in that position that they relegate them to, as opposed to respectfully speaking up, that will always be. You said, I handled him. What you did was brought balance. With the one that you were talking about you could deal with, you actually brought balance. You see? I've heard people say that they would much rather have a female, so they'd much rather have a male boss than females. Why? Because females don't act like females when they're in a position of authority. They act like they think they're supposed to act like males. Or at least they try to. And
gotta turn it on.
we're going to have a come to Jesus moment. You understand what I'm saying? So it's always the one who appears to be your enemy is the one who needs something from you.
I guess my question.
I asked you, Diane.
No,
Oh, you going?
no, I'm letting her simmer say.
Okay.
I'm trying to do my thoughts, whether I want to put mine out there or not.
Oh, okay. I didn't keep seeing your hand go up. Oh, okay.
I guess my thing is that in most cases, when you dealing with, you have to work with people and you see this attitude, but isn't there something in you that needs to be balanced out as well?
Yes, most
So
definitely.
it's not, we always, especially as women, we have a tendency to think that it's somebody else's fault. But when you look at yourself, there's something inside of you that needs to be brought out to the light. And this is what helps to bring that forward.
So you don't. So what happens is you don't allow it to happen to you
Right.
without addressing it. See, the biggest thing with us as people, African Americans in particular, is that we have this victim attitude. We have this attitude that we are victim to everything that is. And we don't have and the reason is because we got a slave mentality. We have not moved beyond the shackles of slavery. We have not gone back far enough to see that we did not come out of the womb of beginning as slaves. We have to see beyond slavery. And the desire to separate, every time we start looking beyond slavery, then you're playing the race card. When you start talking about your history, where you came from. Why do we have to always talk about African history? Why do we have to talk about black history? Well, because you talk about European history every day. You see, nobody questions it when you talk about European history. When you talk about the Victorian age, when you talk about the transition from an agrarian society, nobody talks about that. But when you start talking about the northern kingdoms that flourished in Africa, all of a sudden you're playing the race card. That is designed to keep you from moving beyond your slave mentality. It's designed to keep you thinking that you are a victim. I am not a victim. When I walk into a place, I own it. That's my mentality. I got 2 pennies and 2 balls of dust in my pocket. That does not make me who I am. I am who I am because of who I was created to be. The reason I own it is because nothing exists that exists without me. That's my attitude. I own it. And people treat you differently when you put that kind of energy out there. The ones who would look down on you began to cater to you. I remember the first night that I stayed at this particular place in Charleston, in the historic district. That first evening when I got there, I went down to the area where they had the wine and cheese set up. And I was the only African American in the place, other than one person who worked in the kitchen. And this couple was sitting there, white male and his, I assume, wife. They were sitting there. And he looked at me like I was something nasty. Like, you don't belong here. I walked over, I got my cheese and got my little glass of wine and walked over to the table and sat down and said, "How you doing, sir?" And we had a conversation. When I left and came back and he was sitting there, he spoke to me, "Hello, sir." You see what I'm talking about? I could have felt like a victim. Oh, he don't like me. I ain't care. That's his problem. I like you.
That's right.
That's right.
You understand what I'm saying?
That's right.
So we have to get beyond this attitude of being a victim. And we also have to get beyond this attitude of wanting something for nothing. There are all kinds of expressions of that. Want something for nothing. If you go into a hotel and the man take your bags, you owe him. I'm serious. At least $1 per bag. If you go to the airport and the guy takes your bag and checks it in, it's $1. If he takes it to the stand, it's $2 per bag. These are some things that you need to understand. You know, you sit at a table and you sit there for 2 hours, and you end up giving 10%, and then they had turnover after turnover. If you have turnover after turnover, it's at least 30 to 40%. Because you understand what I'm saying? You got to stop wanting something for nothing. That we have to move beyond that, and that's when you start moving beyond your victimhood. We were raised to walk with our head in the air. You might not have what somebody else has, but that's not what makes you who you are. It's not about what you have. It's about who you are. The pride that I was reared with is different than the pride that I have now. The pride that I was reared with was racial pride. That's different now. The pride that I have now is Elohim. So why would I, being Elohim, write off somebody who I know needs me? Why would Jesus, somebody who railed against him, write them off? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Hello? There has to be the constant attitude. All these things happen to us to alter our attitude, to strengthen our attitudes. I want to get your question. I know you got to go.
Well, my question was way back there when we were talking about separation originally.
Yeah.
The masculine and feminine energy. My question was, well, why was the question that I would have is, why was this adverse thought put there in the first place to
Right.
want me
to separate?
To separate.
The adverse thought, it was not, the thought was not put there as an adverse thought. The thought is there if there is an opportunity to stay connected, you know, in terms of the way you think, right? There's also the opportunity to think that you're not connected. Otherwise, there's no free will. You see?
And,
so, go ahead.
And I understood that, but...
Right, I understand exactly why you raised these questions, and they're of necessity to be raised. So what happens is, when every thought that we have, there is an opportunity to have another thought that's converse of that thought. You see? So we have to make the choice. It is a lot easier to flow with the positive energy than it is to make an attempt to change that positive energy to negative energy. Because energy is like money. Energy is negative. I'm sorry, energy is neutral. Money is neutral. You can use money to put a hit on somebody, but you can take that same money and use it to feed somebody. So you are the one who determine, you know, what it is. And the energy that we talk about constantly in here is not, you're the one who determines whether it's positive or negative. I can use the energy that I have to encourage you, or I can use the energy I have to diminish you. Right? We make that determination.
I have a statement to make, and I know it may be selfish or whatever the case may be, but as a minority, my question is, don't you ever get tired of feeling responsible? I mean, with everything on your shoulder, when you do things, people look at you and you're a minority female, you know, you gotta make sure your child doesn't go to jail, your child isn't in a pregnant XYZ, and then learning about Elohim, and I know it sounds crazy or selfish, but I'm like, don't you get tired of feeling you have the world on your shoulders?
Now, first of all, you're not a minority. That's your first mistake.
Okay.
See, the whole concept of minority in itself is separation. That what is a minority? There are more of people on this earth, this color. So we are not a minority, neither are we a majority. We are people. Period. We cannot use these, would pejorative term be a right word? Terms that causes this kind, kind of attitudes that moves us in the opposite direction that we should be moving in, or keep us, rooted in this idea of separation.
This may be hard, but it's impossible to reverse separation without being a victim, because if you are a God, period, you are not a victim, you are in control. To be a victim means that someone else is in control over you and you do not have control over it. So as long as you ever view yourself as anyone having power, or someone else controls this or someone else does that, you will never, ever, ever reconnect. It's impossible.
Does that make sense?
And to go further, it's no one's fault as far as, not to make it racial, but as far as us being African Americans and someone else is being white, and whether we be female or male and us being treated bad, it's not the other person's fault. It's our responsibility to still connect to that person. And to look at it from a different perspective, what if it is you being a God, is your responsibility to free that person by showing them love and connecting to them, so that they have that experience of someone connecting to them regardless of how they were treated. And then all of a sudden, with that experience, they can seek to do the same thing. Without it, they may not know it, especially when you say coming up in a society of a Caucasian, and that idea of always being that little white girl who's 13 years old and she's blue-eyed. To her, without having that experience of love from someone she views as being under her, that true love, she thinks that she has the world because it's a material world.
I was at, I went to the VA to get my hand to occupational therapy. And the lady who did, well, what happened, let me start over, because you need to see an example of what Sheldon's talking about, being in control, as opposed to being a victim. I left the VA in Rock Hill. I had a meeting in Simpsonville at 11 o'clock. The ambulance blocked my car in at the VA because somebody had collapsed, so I couldn't get out. I left Rock Hill at, I guess, a quarter after, maybe 20 after 10 to get to Simpsonville. So I was driving, and then I thought about it. This meeting was set up by someone else. You agreed to it because it's the only time all of you could come together. But you're still in control. So no matter when you get there, it's okay. Now, I'm driving, and then my phone rings. It's one of the parties to the meeting. Then I explain that I'm on the way. The next time my phone rings, there's another party to the meeting. Nobody is there. Nobody. Everybody gets there about 11:10, 11:15. I get there at 20 minutes to 12. When I get there, they just brought their food to the table, so the discussion has not begun. I got a 1 o'clock meeting for occupational therapy in Columbia. I leave at 5 minutes after 1, the meeting in Centerville. 15 minutes at VA, they reschedule. I call. They tell me, the guy tells me, you need to reschedule. And I'm thinking, I don't want to, because I don't want it to show up as a no-show. So he said, well, let me look at this. He looks at it, and he says, had been this morning I could have taken, I hear this lady in the background. And he says, one of my colleagues says, if you can be here by 2, she'll take you. There's no way for me to get there by 2. I say, I'll be there. I get there at 2:20. When I get there at 2:20, I check in, and I'm waiting 10 minutes, and she comes out and apologizes to me because she's been working with somebody else.
Yeah, I did that. Yeah.
You see what you see the pattern here? Now, I'm talking to her, and she's from St. Kitts. And she's talking about the fascination she had with this lady who comes in who has an accent. And she thought she was from the island, but she's from Charleston. And we began to talk about Gullah and how it came into being, et cetera, et cetera. Then she says to me, one of the things that's difficult for me to understand is why do the black people in this country always blame other people for stuff that happens to them? How come they just don't push through? And I said to her, the reason you don't understand it is because you had a different experience. You were not lynched in St. Kitts. You were reared with a different set of values and understandings of governmental society than we were. So I went down the whole thing and said to her, and when I finished explaining to her, she said, I understand. And my last thing to her was this, but that is no excuse to remain a victim. You see? Now, why did I go through that whole story with you? Because number one, I want you to understand that there are people who are of our color, who did come from Africa as slaves, who don't think like we think, because they were not exposed to what we were exposed to. But there's no excuse for us to remain where we are. The other thing I want you to understand is that had I dealt with those situations differently, they would have turned out differently. From the meeting, all of it would have turned out totally different had I said, God, I can't make this meeting. That's a defeatist attitude, and that's becoming a victim of time. I refuse to be a victim of time or anything else. It happened. So it happened. Why did it happen? I don't know. But I choose to accept the fact that it happened so I could be strengthened in the area where I need to be strengthened, regardless of whether I recognize it or not. The areas I mean. You see? So if I call you and you don't get my call, and you call me back later, it's okay that you didn't get my call. It had to be a reason you didn't get it. You see where I'm coming from? Nothing happens without a, and again, lack of a better term, a spiritual reason attached to it. Everything is about the other realm. I said to someone the other day that I believe that we deal with more than 3 dimensions, and that because of my understanding of geometry. And the reason I said that is because I believe that geometry also gives us a reflection of the other world. It's a reflection of it. So I was sitting and reading yesterday, and during the course of my reading, I began to read how geometry matches, in this realm, matches the other world as well, the unseen world, I should say. It parallels it. So I saw the reflection there, but I didn't quite understand how to articulate it. My point is that where did that come from? Your desire brings you to a place of understanding that you never thought you could be. So if you're a victim, it's because you desire to be a victim. If you're separate, it's because you desire to be separate. And you say, well, I don't want that. Well, if you don't want it, stop responding to it or reacting to it. Deal with it the way Janice dealt with it.
Yeah, I got one guy, but the second one, I'm still not there.
Keep working, baby. It might be this. It may very well be that you plant the seed, another waters, and the Creator gives the increase. You might not be the one. You may just need to plant the seed, and there may be times you just move on so somebody else can step into that spot to deal with it. See, very few people can build this house from foundation up without somebody else coming in as a subcontractor. Very few people can do that, right? So not only are we contractors, but we're also subcontractors. So you were a contractor with one, but now you need a subcontractor to come in for the other to help to continue the process. Does that make sense? That's how our life is. And it's not easy to live like that, but if it were easy, then everybody would do it and we would be having this discussion. The difficulty is in that we are so comfortable the way things have been.
But at the same time, everyone in here said that we're responsible for mankind, so there you go.
I mean, shouldn't I be able to get to the
I
point
want to
where
do the same thing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
shouldn't I be able to get to the point where he doesn't affect me anymore, where I'm not hurt?
And that's why this is continuing to happen. Because you can get to that point by making the decision that I'm there.
Just that quick.
That's right. The issue is you've done all you can. The way he responds, that's his problem.
Yeah.
That's his problem that he needs to work.
And everyone in here needs to understand that it is something that deals with you personally. So it may be that that person will continue to do the same exact thing that they have been doing for the past 10 or how many ever years. But what changes is in you. You don't view it as the same exact way, so it doesn't affect you. So their actions may stay the same, but you don't see their actions as the same.
Right. And it's like you're riding down the road, right? And all of a sudden you notice a building. That building been there 10 years, but you never paid any attention, right? The person been doing the same thing for years, but all of a sudden it irritates you. Make it a pearl rather than allow it to remain an irritation. And when you do that, they will say it, but it will be deflected. It won't be absorbed as pain. That's what changes.
So that's her. She has to do that.
That's right. That's what I'm talking about. It's like somebody always call you names. The only time they change calling you names is when it doesn't bother you anymore.
And the way to easily do that is to how to extend yourself from being a victim and to make yourself one with that person. All of a sudden, you're calling me names, you're just being very ugly, whatever. Okay.
Never.
All of a sudden, all of a sudden, instead of me thinking of just me, I think of you. Now I'm thinking of both of us because I'm thinking of you. Why is your niece acting like this? I wonder what happened to her. Now all of a sudden, I'm showing compassion. So in that instance, I have connected with you and I've extended myself. Regardless of the fact if you've done it, connected back to me, I've connected to you. Now all of a sudden, it's hard for me to be upset with you if I'm concerned with why you were acting all out towards me.
I'm laughing because I've tried this and it's
with Caucasians. Okay. Why are Caucasians doing some of the things that they've done for many, many years? Okay, let's think about it. They've been always superior. They've been taught they were superior. That little white girl, that little 13-year-old white girl was taught that. That's what she saw all of her life, and that's all she experienced. So to be honest, can we expect anything else from her? No. But now, because you understand that and you have taken the extra step to understand that, you can show love towards her and you don't look at her as just being some bad, awful, dumb little white girl.
Can I give you an example of how this thing is perpetuated in the other realm without us knowing it? Government was talking about pardons under the Bush administration. There were white men who were not given a pardon. And I don't want to get into the whole story, but just this segment of it. And one of the reasons it was offered was because they had children that were born in a relationship other than marital. There were black men who were not given a pardon. And they were not given a pardon because they had illegitimate children. Those are the terms that were used.
So,
When it was black men, it was illegitimate children. When it was white men, it was relationship other than marriage. That's written in the government records. You see what I'm talking about? That's, now you say, but that doesn't affect me. Yes, it does. Because it's put out there. We are, if we're the tip of the spear, we are the ones who clean all that up by putting it out there, by dealing with it, by taking responsibility for it, to make sure that these things change. You see what I'm talking about? So how do we refer to ourselves? When I talk about my birth being out of wedlock. I don't talk about me being illegitimate. When I was in high school, a teacher called me an illegitimate bastard. The results wasn't pretty. But I decided to look up the word illegitimate to get a clarity. From that point on, I began to understand I am legitimate. If I were not legitimate, I wouldn't be here. So illegitimate speaks to your non-existence. You see, if I am illegitimate by birth, then my life is not legitimate either. My expectations are not legitimate. And if I reference myself as that, subconsciously, that's what I respond to. There is no such thing as illegitimacy. You understand that? My siblings. I don't have half sisters and half brothers. The last time I looked at them, they were whole. George is not my half brother. He's my brother. You see?
Yeah.
I don't have half brothers and half sisters. You understand what I'm saying to you?
Yes.
They are my siblings. So we have to change the language also, because we use the language of victims to perpetuate victimization. We have to change that. We have to change how we talk to and about each other as well as ourselves. And when we begin to change that, then we begin to speak the same language. The reason the language was changed is so that you could not reach this place of the garden where the tree of life is without speaking with a purity. You know, the Tower of Babel was an attempt to get it to the place where life is understood, where life begins. We have to change the way we speak. But before we do that, we got to change the way we think as well. So if the thought goes through your head, change it. Deal with it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Deal with it. Because when you begin to deal with it, the energy that you put out there is different. You know, there should be a certain air about you when you walk into a room. Your presence should be felt, but not in a negative way. If they don't know how it is, they just feel that something is different. There was a man, he was pastoring in Union at the time, Reverend Bailey. And I remember walking into St. Paul, I had on jeans, sneakers, and a t-shirt during the summer. I walked into the area, this dining area, and he was in there. And he says to me, "Boy, you a preacher." I said, "Sir?" He said, "You're a preacher." And that's the first time you ever seen him in his life, first time we ever met. And I said to him, "Yeah, but how do you know it?" He said, "You got a mark on you. There's something about you that's different. I can see it, but I can't explain it." How did he know that? He did not, what he recognized was light. But the only way he knew how to articulate it was, "You're a preacher." You see what I'm saying? So if I felt embarrassed about that, if I felt like it wasn't legitimate, if I felt like something was wrong with, I don't want that, that's not what he was saying. If you feel like you are a victim. When you walk into a room, everybody know you're a victim. And that's not about arrogance.
So what you just said is people are treating you how you telling them to treat you.
That's right. How you allow
That's
them.
what you drawing.
Because now when I walked in that room, I was talking about the man at that particular hotel. He chose to treat me like he has treated other people who look like me. But I chose to change it. Now, the question is, how did he respond to the next one who looked like me that he saw? As a result of what happened. Because if he had spoken to me when I walked in, I wouldn't have sat at that table. I would have just spoken and kept moving. But what did I do? I got in his face and was nice to him. Changed his energy. Now, he could have got up and left. That would have been his loss. He wouldn't have had the pleasure of my company. And I'd have had his table all by myself. I don't know how we got over here where we are now, because we started down there on the other end of the street. Now we over here talking about this whole concept of, the thoughts that we represent as opposed to race.
But it's the same thing.
I
Separation. If you perceive that you're separate, then you automatically perceive that you're a victim. You can't be, as Sheldon said,
right, you're right.
a victim and one with creator.
The other thing is, I want to point out too, is this whole idea of religion again. I want to talk about that. Because we cannot allow powers other than Father to set the standards for what we believe and who we are spiritually. We can't do that.
Powers
Other than Father, Mother.
Oh.
When I had the encounter with the people from that church in Union, it was because I was teaching counter to what standards they had laid for what Christianity is. And the thing that stood out the most with me is that when they came at me with doctrine. When I responded with Scripture. And they delegitimized the Scripture in their own minds by saying, you're teaching a dangerous doctrine. Because my statement was, God is in every man, regardless of who he is or what he has done or is doing. And he said, God does not live in every man unless they saved. And I said, that is not what the Scripture says. And when I dealt with it, he breathed the breath of life and man became a living soul. Mm-hmm. I asked him, so did he take the breath of life out of the other folk? Who, because of their attitudes? And he said to me, I still say that God doesn't live in anybody until they're saved. And he quoted the Scripture that said that God does not hear a sinner's prayer. And my response to that was, go to the Scripture and you will see the Pharisee said that, not Jesus. You can say it because you're a Pharisee, but it don't make it real. You see where I'm coming from? And this thing went on for a long, long time. We battled. Why? Because there was an effort to tell me that you don't measure up to me. And when he said we will have lunch to discuss this, I will call you. And I said, by all means. And the radio dude says, I want you to discuss this on the radio. He ain't called me yet. And the guy who said we going to have lunch, I ran into him at the Y 2 months later, and he stopped coming to the Y at that time. Because he did not want to have that encounter. Why did he not want to have it? Because I resisted the foundational standards that he laid for what the book says by using the book, and he knew I was right. So he didn't want to face the truth because he had proved something. He can handle the truth. You see where I'm coming from? So regardless of what it takes, you must not only do the right thing, but you must speak truth into every situation. And you do not have to do it in a way that is antagonistic. You can do it in a way that is diplomatic. One of these days, y'all gonna know that this being helped me with a word here. Can you help a brother out?
So we don't volunteer. I think it takes a lot more time to be diplomatic than to go off and being mad or sad or whatever.
It does.
And I was sharing with a couple people, I run into the same situation. Janice and I were kind of dealing with the same thing on two different places at my job. And it's interesting how people will try to keep you as a victim by doing things where you don't know what's coming at you. And constantly when they do bring whatever it is, it's like, where did that come from? Okay. Why didn't you say something to me about that? And eventually when I decided that enough doors were open for me to deal with whatever it was, and I addressed it in a long letter and sent it to all the powers that be, now this person is thanking me every time they meet me. Well, thank you for doing this. Well, thank you. I appreciate you doing this. Everything is a thank you, which before they wouldn't even come up to me unless they had another person, another administrator with them, like someone else to
witness.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And the first time after the,
I helped with the word.
I was thinking about the same
exactly, the witness. You know, and I can't believe, why do you have to have two of you around me whenever you come to say something to me? And eventually, after this long letter was sent to everyone that she sent this long letter to, the powers that be within the district. After the letter, now everything is, oh, well, thank you for doing this, and thank you for doing that, and we really appreciate you doing this, and you know, like, okay, now you're going overboard the other way, and I don't know what.
That's okay. Then let go.
Right.
Let go overboard the other way.
Exactly.
Because it needs to spill over to somebody else, probably. So let it go. See, that's, listen to this. The most important thing that Deborah said was when I decided, when I made the decision. You see? That's the most important thing that she said. When you made the decision that things would be different. They were. You hear me?
I guess I'm just going to piggyback on what you're saying. I mean, I experienced it too. Just being a project manager at DHEC, and, you know, I go into meetings and, you know, they'll, you know, have the consultant sitting there and we're talking, and they'll be looking at my manager like, oh, I guess he's the one, you know, in control of the project. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I was sitting there and my mind was like, oh gosh, you know, I guess I should diminish myself because he ain't, you know, they aren't paying attention to me. But then when I decided to say, okay, you know what, I mean, I am the project manager, so I'm just gonna hold my head high, you know. And then finally, like, my manager said, well, you're not gonna be working with me, you're gonna be working with her. And the whole time they were talking to him, and they were ignoring me, you know, because I was the only black woman in there.
Yeah.
But then when they finally like, oh, okay, you know, it was just what I decided to, you know, I guess instead of diminish myself, just look, you know, keep my head high and say, okay, I'm the one.
You changed the situation.
Yeah.
We were, well, I was telling the people I had to go to Newberry to look at the Opera House because as a group from Alumni Association, and a couple of people within the Alumni Association want to do things. They want to lead and they want to push things through, but it just does not sit well with me because it's not right. It's stuff that's Just doesn't make sense. And when we went, all of us rode together, which I didn't want to do. But I got a text saying that we're going to ride in one vehicle. If you think well of it, meet us. And I was a little late and they waiting on me anyway. So when we got there, we went through, on purpose, we went through the tour, and the people were talking to us about, how they got funded, how they set it up, how they set the board, and all kinds of stuff. And I wasn't saying a word. And the people who wanted to be in charge of something constantly questioning and talking. So finally we got towards the end, and the lady says, can you give me an outline of your project, of the project that you want to see, that you want to bring into being, and could you give me an idea of the sources that you want to approach and what the end product is going to look like? And dead silence. And I'm standing behind everybody. And one of them says, he the president. Now all of a sudden, I's the president. So I proceeded to tell her what our projections were and what we wanted the end product to look like. And we had no problem with cooperation, naming, the performance art theater that we wanted to develop. And we had no problem with a corporate sponsor redoing, the gem capture, etc. I went on down the whole line and told her all the stuff we're going to do. And when I finished, she said, she looks at them and she says, that should be your spokesman. When we began to deal with corporate sponsors, we only had one spokesperson because corporations don't like to deal with, funding sources don't like to deal with multiple people. They want one person. That should be your spokesman. And I just stepped back behind everybody and nobody looked at me. You see where I'm coming from? If I had pushed my way through and said, I'm the president, you need to talk to me instead of them. All you need to do is just be who you are. When things are supposed to come your way, they will. Just do the right thing, treat people fairly, and don't be late on purpose. Ride with them.
I want to go back to the words you used.
Okay.
I diminished myself.
Yeah.
Then when I realized I was the manager, I held my head up. It's the same thing as I diminished myself, and then when I realized who I am, that I am Elohim. That's the knowing.
Yeah.
I mean, it all boils back to that. And I guess, the reason why we're sitting here talking about this today is because we are the spear, the point of the spear. We have to feel all these things. We have to feel that hurt. We have to feel that outrage, because it is outrage. We have to feel that anger. We have to feel that hate, because some of it is hate. When you strip it.
Yeah.
If it's not love. So the bottom line is we have to feel that, because we have to remember not to diminish ourselves. Because I realize who I am, and I hold my head up, because all of this is just stuff. It's the illusion. The truth is what I say it is. And I'm not saying that in an arrogant way. The truth is what I say it is from the position of my Creator and being one with my Creator. So I just thought it was just so interesting that you used the very words, I diminished myself. And I realized I was the project manager.
And it's like a song. You have diminished yourself beneath Elohim. You see? We are always self-debasing. When we, even in actuality, when we get to that place, you will never diminish yourself, even if you're not the manager. Right. You see, when we realize who we really are, even if you're not the manager, you won't do it. It doesn't matter what title or position you've been labeled with. That's not who you are, that's what you do. See? So, because when we start talking about labeling of positions and authorities, right, we actually are talking about inferiority and superiority. You know?
But I wasn't even going there.
I know you weren't. I know you weren't.
My thing is, when you understand who you are, it doesn't matter what the title is.
Right.
I mean, that you can be just as comfortable in a group of people with 50 managers, and you're not the manager, but you've got the knowledge that they need from you. So.
And just to give some context to the whole situation as far as managers and these people, the superiority and inferiority complex thing. The reason why all this started to begin with is because those Caucasians that you started off talking about encounter indigenous peoples from all across the world. They had a higher level of spirituality and awareness of who they were. So you had the same exact situation where someone sees themselves as inferior and has to do something to make themselves feel better than the other, which comes in materialism. So actually, what the reality of what we have been following is someone who has experienced separation, and then we followed the person who has experienced separation, and then that's how we got separated. So that same hate, I mean that same exact thing as far as us feeling separated or them or being just the perception, because I don't feel separated. The perception that you feel separated is what they experience. So that's what drove them there, and you just following behind it, so to speak.
So
if you actually realize that's what's actually taking place, once again, will you still feel the same way about people doing that?
You talked about earlier how you said when you became aware of who you are, you already start talking about certain things. Caucasians would say, oh, you're racist or you're this and that. But on the other spectrum, when you get around some African Americans and you start voicing who you are, they call you bougie, arrogant, or whatever the case. So how do you kind of find that balance between?
I deal with the same way I do with everybody. That's learned behavior. You know, you can call me bougie, you can call me arrogant. Matter of fact, some people in here have called me arrogant. Hurt my feelings. It doesn't matter whether they call me arrogant or not. It really doesn't matter. Honestly, the reason I left Howard University is because they were bougie. That's why I left Howard and went to Federal City College, because they were bougie. Federal City was the plantation, and I chose to be on the plantation rather than in the big house on the hill. You know, this is funny. Something just dawned on me. Yesterday, Phoebe and I were cleaning out the storage building, and I came across some pictures from back in the day. And you know, with me in Gary, Indiana, San Diego at these different meetings, with some of the other people that, you know, I went through the 60s with, Peter Stoker, Carmichael, those kinds of things that we did. And I didn't make the connection. Maybe that was the energy that brought about this whole discussion. I don't know. Maybe that was it. Because I began to, when I was looking at them, I began to think about later on how far my thought patterns had progressed from, you know, having written the International Policy Statement on Israel and terming them as terrorists to where I am now, understanding the true meaning of Israel. You know, so I think that energy, there's a shift, I guess I'm saying, that was necessary for me to do what I'm doing, you know, for that shift to take place. And I think the shift must take place with all of us, every one of us. Okay? Questions?
Who locked the door?
Are there any questions? Did I see your hand? Okay.
Did Diane want to say something?
Okay, are we making sense in here today? Now, I guess one of the things that we need to make you aware of is not going to get better.
Thanks.
It's not.
That ain't what I really want to say.
It's not.
Are you crying?
Yes.
Oh my.
No, it's
Okay.
not. It's not going to
I know.
get better. And the reason that it's not going to get better is because it's a necessity that we do what we do. And it's like you trying to mold a vase without clay. You know, I mean, you got to have what you need to change in your hands in order to change it, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, okay. That's why we have to have all this exposure to all these different things. I was talking to Phoebe. We passed the church yesterday, and I said that's Corinthian pillars outside, and she said, "Huh." But the Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian, the Greek architect. I read all of this stuff. All of it comes into play, and I said it to make the point that whatever labor for, read it. Try to understand everything you can possibly understand. Why? Because what happens, it gives you a better feel of what's going on. Not Caucasians, not African, not Japanese, Chinese, etc. It gives you an understanding of this earthly mindset. What's important to people. That's what. And when you find out what's important to people, then you're better able to reach them.
But you know what really helps me? I don't know about anybody else, but what really helps me is that I know I have you guys, great, all the people that you cover, to help me deal with whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So, and it really helps me to deal with these things.
And the same thing here. You helped me see clearly. I had these thoughts, and they were more general nuggets of wisdom without understanding, or with a modicum of understanding at best.
Okay.
But the discussion of it and hearing what you experience, these are the kinds of things that help us to dissect what we see as separation so that we can move beyond it. Because see, if you really think about it, we haven't gotten too far down the road when we talk about separating from father and mother. Mm-hmm. All we did was come out of the fourth alphabet. We don't know what the rest of them bring. Mm. You see? Yeah. Because as soon as we got to the door, we said, "See ya," deuces. Yeah. So we don't know what. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
We don't know what the rest of them bring. So we went our own way, as opposed to remaining on the journey that was set before us. So now our efforts are to get to where we were before we got to where we are, so we can stop being who we are, who we become, so we can be who we are. Got it?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions? All right. Now, whenever you hear the word Israel, do not think about it as a geographical location. Remember that it is those who rule like God. When you hear the term Judaism, Christianity, Islam, whatever, understand that these are terms that have been molded by men as opposed to spiritual journey that was orchestrated by the Creator. And we have to dig deeper into what they meant from the beginning as opposed to what they have come to mean. Got it?
Yeah.
When we see what they meant from the beginning, we will see that they are not as different as we think they are. They really aren't. Divergent pathways leading to the same place. When we think about, when you hear the term racism, understand it's not about racism in terms of somebody making another race a victim. It is about the perpetuation of the illusion of separation. Okay? When you have sexism, it doesn't matter what ism it is, it's just a separation. And we have to understand it from that perspective. And it is at that juncture that we can begin to realize that the one is one but many. And the many are becoming one in the way that they think, the way they act, and the way they speak. We are the many becoming one. And if we can become one, we can lead others to become one. It's not enough for us to understand and accept just for ourselves. This is not about us. It really isn't. It's about folding the matrix of the mind into itself so the mind can truly become one mind as it has been from the beginning. Does that make sense to you? Trials we shall have. We are going to have these trials. We are going to face these tribulations. That's not a problem. That's an expectation. We are going to have those things. And when we have those trials and those tribulations, they are opportunities for us to rise to the occasion and be Elohim for those who don't know that they are Elohim.
And be the love that you are. You know it.
Yeah. And what he said too. When you be the love you are, you stop trying to give it. You know, you have these terms that love is never received to keep, is always to give. You don't receive love, you don't give love, you are love. That's who you are.
Love is an energy, and you are energy.
And there are different expressions of that energy, be it parental, spousal, however it is, you know? So, and do not try to direct it. We have a tendency to try to direct our love. You cannot direct it and be love at the same time. Because love flows as energy does, where it chooses. It flows where it chooses. And as it flows where it chooses, you respond rather than react. And let your response always be in line with what truth is. If you don't know what truth concerning that matter is, then let your response be silence or nothing. Don't make it up as you go. That's how we got into trouble that we're in. Make it up as we go. You know, the church talk about contemporary music, and they rail against it until everybody start listening to it. Now they got a contemporary service. The church started railing against rap music until everybody started rapping. Now they got rap gospel.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? If you don't make it up as you go.
How did they get the mimes then?
What?
How did they get the mimes? Because I don't remember anybody asking for them.
They did mimes, and they did the mimes to give the children something to do.
Yeah.
And one of my kids said,
they got this exclusive over here.
Where John was talking about the dude who was a mime in his church. And he talking about, that just don't sit well with me. A 30-year-old man hit his mime. How you be 30 years old man? That's what kids do. And he says some other things on it. But that's a classic example of giving people what they want as opposed to what they need. The agape in the Greek is giving what you need and not what you want. And what you need does not always feel good. But I promise you, if you flow with it long enough, you'll learn to enjoy it. Quite pleasure. Quite pleasure. Okay? Last thing. People who end up heroes in physical battle didn't go into battle to be a hero. They rose to the occasion and did the right thing or the courageous thing at the right time. People who become spiritual heroes are people who respond regardless of the adversity that they face. They respond in the right way. Does that make sense?
Another thing you just said is it's not anything that's even premeditated. It happens right there in the now, in the moment.
Right, in that moment. So, so you're going home and thinking about how you go respond. That's a good thing. But your desire ought to be to get to the place where you can respond in the moment without giving thought to it. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Having said that, I don't know what time it is, but I know what time it is.
11:45. I just looked in my pocketbook.
You got a clock in your pocketbook? Somewhere having that clock that was on the wall. Okay.
My stomach let me know what time it is.
Oh,
too.
okay. All right, but anyway, I'm done. Unless there are any more questions, I'm done.